Another school we're talking about as maybe a playoff contender in 2025 is the South Carolina Gamecocks. Really disappointing year in 2023, the 5-7 record. They bounced back in a major way this past season with a 9-4 record. They just missed out on making the college football playoff. They were one of the final schools that got left out of the college football playoff, and they ultimately ended up number 19 in the final AP poll, which is their highest finish since Jadeveon Clowney's final season in 2013. And like that 2013 team, their defense really drove their success in 2024, tying for 8th with a 91.8 defensive grade last year. They did lose plenty of talent from that side of the ball, but they do return a top 10 player in the country, in our opinion, an edge rusher, Dylan Stewart. His development, alongside a couple other freak athletes in Lenore Sellers and Nick Harbor at wide receiver, really could determine whether or not South Carolina will be a college football playoff team in 2025.
Certainly have the top-end talent. This team is not as deep as they were last year, but Sellers is a 6'3", 240-pound athletic freak at quarterback. Nick Harbor, like you just mentioned, might be a more freakier version of DK Metcalf if he can figure out some of the finer points of play in the position. And then you mentioned it. Look, last year the defense was the headliner. Dylan Stewart is the headliner this year. It's not as thick a defense as they had last year. A lot of those pieces graduated, got drafted, but this is a potential. If he wasn't coming out the same year as some quarterbacks in Jeremiah Smith, Dylan Stewart's the type of pass rusher that could go number 1 overall in a draft one day, right? So you're talking about the top-end talent that's good enough to scare any team that they play across from them, right? And they had it obviously last year and even a lot more depth, but when you still have players like that, like Sellers, like Harbor, like Stewart, that's a problem because games can get away from you real quick on the other side.
You could argue Lenore Sellers, the freakiest athlete at quarterback in the country. Dylan Stewart, the freakiest defensive lineman in the country in terms of how athletic he is. And then Nick Harbor is the freakiest athlete overall in college football. We'll talk about him in just a second when we get to the offensive player spotlight, but some of the freakiest athletes in the nation are playing for the Gamecocks right now. Now, the question mark is, will the offensive line be a major issue for South Carolina like it's been in the last 2 seasons for them? Over the last 2 years, South Carolina had the 100th offensive line grade in 2024, 115th in 2023. They have a lot of pressure on 40.1% of their passing plays over the last 2 years, the 3rd worst rate in the Power 4. They also must replace all 3 starters from their interior offensive line, and there's 2 returning tackles, Kason Henry and Josiah Thompson, each had sub-60 PFF grades last year. Now, Josiah Thompson was very close to being a 5-star recruit. He was starting a lot as a true freshman last year, so a lot of upside for him there at offensive tackle, but you need him to hit, and you need Kason Henry to get a lot better at the other tackle spot, and then you need a brand new interior offensive line to improve a lot because, Dalton, this offensive line over the last 2 years when Rattler was there, Spencer Rattler was there, and then even last year with North Sellers, that's really held back the offense.
Well, they're lucky they have Sellers to bail him out of a lot of sacks, right, at 240 pounds, and he's one of the hardest players in the country to tackle. I mean, let's just dive right into it, right, with all that coming together. Lenore Sellers is... he's in the Anthony Richardson, Jalen Milroe, just super toolsy category, right? 4th in the nation in deep passing grade last season. What was it? What did you tell me? 18 missed tackles forced against Clemson?
Quarterback record for PFF.
I mean, one of the most dynamic runners maybe you're ever going to see at the quarterback position. 6'3", 240, freakish athlete, but the passing started to catch up. He struggled in the first half of the year, and then an 80 passing grade from week 8 onward. That's what gives you hope. He started to dial it back just a little bit. South Carolina started emphasizing more yards after catch and telling him, hey, you're not the only athlete out here. Let these other guys do the job. So I think when you talk about sheer tools, arm strength, the ability to run, the ability to scramble and improvise and do all those fun things that we love watching every week, there's not many better at it than Sellers, if any, right now in college football. The question, a lot like we talked about earlier with DJ Lagway, is inconsistency. 70.9 passing grade on throws under 20 yards last year, 87th in the country, right? So it's accuracy, it's throwing the ball on time. It's not just relying on your natural ability to win every single time, right? There's a chance that Sellers could be an elite player. The other thing is ball security. 4.6% turnover-worthy play rate is too high, right? Sometimes loose with the football when you're trying to improvise. So look, I won't sit here and tell you he doesn't have a boatload of talent. He does, but to me, it's very similar to DJ Lagway at Florida, where I need you to do the little things. I need you to get a little bit more accurate underneath, play a little more fundamentally sound, more consistently, and then we could be talking about what everybody's hyping up as a first-round or possibly top 10 pick.
Another guy, Dalton, who could be a first-rounder, top 10 pick if he just hits on the tools this guy has, is his top receiver in Nick Harbor. He is, without a doubt, the freakiest athlete in college football. In fact, friend of the show, Bruce Feldman, a great college football reporter for The Athletic, he puts out an incredible list every year of just ranking the 100 or so freakiest athletes in the country. In Nick Harbor's true freshman year, he was the number one player on that list. In Nick Harbor's true sophomore year, he was the number one player on that list. He's the only player ever who's been the number one freak athlete on Bruce Feldman's list for multiple seasons. Why? This guy is 6'5". This guy is 235 pounds, and this guy was a second-team All-American as a sprinter for South Carolina's track team. Usually guys that size are like maybe not shot put, but like other at strength events like that. He's a second-team All-American as a sprinter. He ran a 10-1 in the 100-meter dash, a 20.2 in the 200-meter dash, and the U.S. invited him to the Olympic trials, and he said, "No, I'm going to focus on football." This guy could be an Olympic-level sprinter at 6'5", 235 pounds, which is basically like a tight end size nowadays, too. Now, of course, he's relatively raw as a receiver right now. There's no denying that. But he did lead the Gamecocks in receiving yards last year, albeit being 376 receiving yards last year. If he can show some more nuance as a route runner, as a junior, and improve his hands a little bit, Dalton, this is the kind of athlete that NFL teams do not let fall out of the first round if he can show a little bit more of nuance and a little more development in his game as a junior.
Absolutely. I mean, you're talking about a guy, we're not even asking for elite route running. If a guy that size, that fast is an average route runner, he's going to be a star in the league. He's at the very least, he's going to be DK Metcalf. Yeah. That's exactly, because Metcalf's not the most nuanced route runner in the NFL either. We're not asking him to be Justin Jefferson. If he just puts a little bit of polish on this, there's nobody that can stop that. 6'5", I mean, those are Calvin Johnson type things you're talking about, right? But we have to see it, right? He less than 400 receiving yards last season. He really was just kind of a straight line runner, so it doesn't work like that in football. In football, it's about your ability to change direction and stop and start at any given moment, right? So certainly when you talk about just freak athletes, I mean, guys 235 pounds, they shouldn't run 10-1s. No. That's silly. That's reserve. Even if you're that tall, like even a guy like Usain Bolt was that tall, he wasn't 235. No. That's a freight train. That's crazy, right? So, I mean, you're talking about the idea of Sellers having an 80-yard arm and Harbor's speed. Sounds great. It certainly does. You've got a couple of freaks out here, but everything in between, they got to execute, right? They got to get to be more consistent football players to get there.
And listen, we mentioned before, South Carolina's got three of the freakiest athletes in the country. Two of them got to get a lot more consistent, and Lenora Sellers and Nick Harbor to really hit on their true ceilings. But Dawn, the one guy who doesn't really need to get that much better because he's already maybe the best pass rusher in the country, Dylan Stewart, a top 10 player for us already heading into his true sophomore year.
Yeah, this is a guy who all he needs to be maybe the best defensive player in the country is maybe 8 or 10 more pounds of muscle than he had last year to hold up and run defense. But you talk about just a freak show of a pass rusher. 91.4 pass rush grade as a true freshman. Sixth best in the country, 51 pressures. I mean, he came out immediately in his first game against Old Dominion and just absolutely tore it up and then did it to the SEC really for the rest of the year. I mean, just you talk about – it's funny because that defense of South Carolina last year was absolutely loaded, and yet Stewart was still the best player on their team. I mean, it's just a ridiculous level of talent, and not just athletic talent. The pass rush moves and the arsenal coming from him as a true freshman last year and now coming up as a true sophomore, right around 250 pounds? Yeah. I mean, the sky's the limit. That's all you could really say with Dylan Stewart. I know we've talked about him a lot this summer. He's your number 2 edge rusher in the country behind another guy we're going to talk about in a little bit. But, I mean, just a freak of nature. That's what they have on this defense. And they lost a lot of pieces on this defense, but they certainly stand a chance with Stewart running off the edge there.
Yeah, my number 2 edge rusher in the country, and he's already the best pass rusher in the country, in my opinion, as only a true sophomore. If he can get a little stronger in run defense, he's could absolutely be the number 1 player at edge rusher in the country and a future top 5 pick probably, regardless too. All right, Dawn, the win total is set at 7.5 for South Carolina right now. Can this be a college football playoff contender, or do you think you'll take the under on that and be more of a solid team in the SEC?
7.5. I think I'm going under.
Wow, really?
I think I'm going to do it because I
Wow.
I like the top end talent a lot, right? Sellers, I do need to see another step as a passer, right? They're losing. I mean, you talk about what they lost. They're replacing Rocket Sanders at running back.
Yeah.
And as of this recording, because I know these are going to get cut separately and probably resolved after we get done with this and it's put out, but Rasul Faison, the running back, is going to be getting a hearing about his eligibility on July 9th. So we don't know. That's up in the air, and he was a 1,000-yard back at Utah State last year. Nick Harbor's a great idea.
Yeah.
But right now he's an idea. They're replacing Josh Simon at tight end, right? Albeit they got Jordan Dingle from Kentucky, right? And the two big things for me are, one, you still have questions about this offensive line that has struggled big time the last 2 years, and Sellers and the scheme has really bailed them out with the run game. And two, we cannot forget. I just can't help but get over it. They lost so many pieces on defense in the draft. It felt like they didn't put the offense together quite in time to make the playoff last year, but T.J. Sanders, Tonka Hemingway, Demetrius Knight, Nicky Manwari, O'Donnell Fortune. And there's some other good players coming back, right? DQ Smith and Jalen Kilgore. There's other good players. Brian Thomas Jr. is coming back. So
who's the other edge rusher they lost to? I'm blanking on the name. He won defensive player of the year. Oh my God.
Kyle Kennard.
Kyle Kennard. Thank you,
Eli. They had so many great they had so many great defensive players last year. Sometimes that's why that's exactly why Eli's here. But I'm going to take the under. This team lost a lot, and I don't think that's getting talked about enough within all of the Lenora Sellers and Dylan Stewart hype. And yes, we're a part of that, especially with Stewart, but there's not nearly as much depth on this team as there was last year. And I'm worried, especially in the trenches, aside from Stewart, how that's going to hold up on both sides of the ball. I'm going to take the under 7.5.
Wow. See, this is actually, I've been on the fence for a lot of these. I was like, I'm taking the over for this team. I think 7.5 is low, man. I'm going over. I'm going at least 8 wins for South Carolina.
They have an interesting schedule, I think, with a lot of 50-50 games. Even Virginia Tech week 1, I don't think that's going to be easy. It wasn't easy last year.
Clemson last game of the year, which is
actually
tough.
No, they didn't play Virginia Tech last year. I'm thinking of Vandy. But either way, I mean, Virginia Tech, Clemson out of conference at the end of the year is always
at LSU,
LSU,
Alabama.
There's a lot of 50-50 games. I actually do think that's a good number, but I don't know that this team's going to be as good as last year's team. They lost. There's so and these are guys that got drafted. Some of them high.
Yeah.
I mean, Kennard went in the 3rd round, right? T.J. Sanders went in the 2nd round to Buffalo. Hemingway got drafted. Knight went in the 2nd round. Eman Ward. God, South Carolina took up like the whole 2nd round of the draft, actually, now that I think about it. This was like a top 3 to 5 defense last year. Stewart's great. He's going to be great. But as a unit, I don't know that they're a top 5 defense this year.
All right.
If Clayton White and those guys can prove me wrong, so be it. Feel free to go out there and do it. But they lost a boatload of veteran talent in this last draft.
I'm taking the over on this team right now. 17th hardest schedule in the country, which is about average in the SEC. I look at that schedule. I don't know if they're going to lose 5 games next year. So I'm going to say over for South Carolina. And will they be a playoff contender? Probably not. I probably won't pick them to be a playoff team for me next year. But they'll be in the mix of it for sure. And I think over 7.5 will be enough.
It's not a crash and burn situation. It's just that they're going to have to – there's a lot of almost 50-50 games here, and they have a lot – to me, they have a lot less room for error than last year. And I need that offensive line to be better.
Yeah.